So I just got back from watching Downsizing, and I can just say right now that that was probably the strangest movie that I've ever seen in my entire life. Let's get into it.
What we do here is go back.
Downsizing is probably the most peculiar movie I've definitely seen this year. And the fact that it's not like a make you think kind of weird, it's just like a what did I just watch kind of weird. I would like to tell you more, but I think the best way to do it would be divided into 3 sections. Story, characters, and then a whole section dedicated to actual what the heck just happened moments. Find out next. I think the 2 biggest problems with the movies can be summed up with what happened to the story. The first can be inconsistent and poorly driven characters and very incoherent storylines. The characters themselves in the film have 0 to none motivations for anything that they do, except for minor details that happen in the movie. And the problem with that is that it doesn't let the audience become connected to the characters. If we can't really guess what they're gonna do, or at least have sense with what they're gonna do, then we're not gonna be able to follow them, and we're not gonna be able to be like, yeah, that's a good decision. The decisions they make aren't even led up to. It just happens. And then you're just like, I don't know what type of character this is, and I don't know what he's going to do next. I mean, for a movie villain, that might be unpredictable and good, but this is for like every single character in the movie. Let's just go one by one. Matt Damon's character gets little to none explanation on what he's gonna do. The only decision that he makes that I can actually understand is the part where he actually agrees to get downsized. Because he's explained all the positive, but none of the negatives of getting downsized. And he's also like going under a little bit, so I can assume that he would get downsized, and so would his wife. And that assumption becomes correct to a point. One of the biggest parts where the character does something that nobody even expected and nobody would even assume that they would do is the wife. The wife of Matt Damon decides not to undergo the procedure, but I can make sense with that if she showed any second thoughts throughout the movie, which she didn't. She did not show any second thoughts at all. And it's not even until she gets her eyebrow shaved off that she actually has the revelation of, you know what, maybe I shouldn't undergo this procedure. And that just shows how poorly written the character is. Like, we follow the wife for at least a third of the movie, and she's portrayed to be a nice person, and then she just turns around and be this like sudden, like, just terrible person. And I know what you're wondering, just like, oh, she decided not to undergo the procedure. She's not a terrible person. What she said to Matt Damon after she left kind of negates the fact that she was like a nice person. Here's what happens. Matt Damon wakes up and he's like, all right, where's my wife? You guys said that I can meet her after this. Where is she? And then she calls him and she's like, you know, honey, I don't really want to do this. I didn't want to undergo this procedure. I'm sorry. Please don't be mad at me. Please don't be mad at me. And me and Matt Damon are having kind of the same reaction, which makes me kind of be the only, and this is the only time I actually relate with the character. Me and Matt Damon are like, don't be mad with you. You literally just screwed me over in the biggest possible way. You decided to have second thoughts and not go through with the procedure, and I'd be fine with that. Like, if you don't want to do it, that's your choice, but we were gonna do it together. Like, Matt Damon and her were gonna do it together, and he left, and then you were about to do it, but you had second thoughts. Not only did you have second thoughts, but you had second thoughts when they were shaving off your eyebrow. At least on a spectrum, on even the spectrum of realism, she might have had second thoughts when they were shaving her head. But no, she has second thoughts once her first eyebrow is cut off. Not even like a little bit shaved off. It's like once it's completely off, she's like,
you know, this might not have been the best idea.
And I'm like, how is that even supposed to be real? How is this supposed to be actually something that a human does? And that just made me completely destroy the character for me. And I get it. Maybe it was supposed to be for laughs. But then that's the problem with the movie itself. Is it delivers so many like jokes like it's a Marvel movie, but then it decides to be a social satire or a social commentary. And I get it, social satire can have comedy, You can't just have a huge event happen to the character and then just play it off as a joke. Minor stuff can happen as a joke, but not a huge event. And then Matt Damon's depressed the entire movie, so I'm like, yeah, that's nothing to joke about. But unfortunately, the movie decided that it was a great thing to joke about. The only character that I could actually sympathize with and empathize with would be the Vietnamese woman. The backstory on her was very well written, in which she was a prisoner taken by the government after she was being a political activist for the environment. And then she was shrunk, and she escaped by putting herself and a few of the other prisoners into a TV box and then shipped to the States. In which she's the only survivor and she has a peg leg. And so everything she does in the movie is for the environment and social activism and trying to help other people. And I'm like, that's great, that's great, that's all we needed, that's great. Now let's do that to the other characters. But unfortunately, that doesn't happen. That is probably my biggest example of bad character motivation. This wasn't for all the characters, but it was for some of the major characters in the movie, and that just completely took me away from the movie. The second problem that the story has is that it cannot choose between being either a dramatic movie, a social satire, or a comedy. So they try to be in between. And that's fine. A social satire can be dramatic and comedic at the same time, but it's like, it has to have the perfect balance. And if it doesn't have the perfect balance, then it just falls on its feet. And this movie didn't have balance at all. Instead of having a comedic sequence, in which, that's great, and then you kind of ease it into the dramatic sequence, that's great. They have it where they have dramatic sequences right here, and then they sprinkle in comedy like it's a Marvel movie. And I'm like, and it's Marvel, it's a Marvel movie. We're not supposed to be taking it that seriously, but this is a movie about real people. This could I know downsizing can really happen, but let's just pretend that it could. We're supposed to sympathize with the characters and we're supposed to feel what they're feeling. I can't really sympathize with the main character when the event that happened to him was played just for giggles. I'm sorry, but I just can't. I can't. I think the last problem when it came to the story was just how much of nonsensical it was. You couldn't really, relate to any of the things that were... You didn't know what was going to happen. And that can be good in some situations, and that can be very bad in other situations. And when it came to this movie, it kind of led on the very bad side. For a thriller movie, I can imagine, or a horror movie. For a thriller or a horror movie, I can imagine it would be good for the audience to be like, I don't know what's going to happen. But for a social commentary or a social satire, we need to have at least a little inkling of what the story is about. And the problem with the movie is that we don't know what the point of it is until at least 2/3 through the movie. And then at that point, the point is kind of, what? My actual reaction is just, what's going on? We don't have any sequence. The events kind of lead up to another, but it just seems like the movie doesn't have a point. Or maybe I'm just missing it. In which I tried really hard to think about it. I really did, but I just completely missed the point. I think the biggest thing that the movie is trying to push to us is maybe just enjoy life, while we can. Because maybe we're just all gonna die. And I'm just paraphrasing what the Vietnamese woman said in the end of the movie. And so I guess that's what the point was. The entire movie, it was just it was just Matt Damon, seeing, the social, pluses and minuses of going small. And I guess we could kind of relate that to real life and to the real world situation. The entire, third act of the movie is him in Norway going with the idea of going into a hole for 8,000 years. And I'm like, where did this come from? And so all these problems kind of snack on each other like dominoes. You have Matt Damon's character doing things in the movie that we don't understand because there's no lead up to it, and we don't understand why he's doing it. And when it comes to that, and the way that they achieve that is with comedic gags during dramatic sequences that are clearly not needed in the movie. And then that all in turn creates a storyline that doesn't make any sense. Because we don't know what the characters are doing. We don't know whether we're supposed to laugh or be sad with the characters. And so in all, it creates a viewing in which we're so passive we don't know what is happening to us. And I hate to say it, but that is probably the worst way that we could watch a movie. Overall, I give the story a 4 out of 10. Obviously, it's not going to dip under a 2 because it actually had, good transitions to each other, events built up to the next event, and it was a linear story. Like, any kind of story that leads from one to the other will get at least like a 2 or above. But the 4 isn't really, but this story isn't really above that. It was just really, really dumb. Let's go on to the characters. Let me just go one by one and sum up the characters and what I thought and how they did. I like Matt Damon as an actor. I like a lot of the movies he's in, but I think this is probably the least favorite movie that I know of him being in. Because his character itself is just so passive in what he does. Everything he does, he just does it so lazily. Like, he just follows what other people do. He doesn't really make a decision for himself except for downsizing and then going into the cave. And downsizing is the only thing that I could be like, hey, like, he has reason to do that. He has absolutely no reason to do that. Because in the movie, it's explained, like, we're going to go down to the cave and we're going to, like, survive for 8,000 years. And then once the planet's actually habitable again, we're going to come back up. And the reason that the Earth isn't habitable is because there's, like, the ice glaciers in Antarctica are melting and they're releasing methane that's going to kill the humans in 300 years. And they say that all really quickly, and hopefully the audience doesn't pick up the fact that it's happening in 300 years. So I'm asking myself, why are they sealing themselves off 300 years before the event that they are sealing themselves off for is actually happening? That's like me about to go to a football game, and it starts in 300 years, so I'm going to go and I'm going to build a civilization in the stadium so that we can watch the football game in 300 years. That's one of the things that just doesn't make sense. And then Matt Damon's character actually goes along with it. And so I'm like,
what?
Not only does he go along with it, but he does so happily. And he finally says, I actually have a purpose in life. I'm going to do this. And I'm like, you know what would be great in the rest of the movie before that is at least like just say in the beginning of the movie, or say, I don't feel like I have a purpose in life. Like, hear me out on this one. We're in the beginning. Like, this is like right before they get downsized, and Matt Damon turns to his wife and he just says, I hope at some point when we downsize, I'm saving the environment enough that I feel like I actually have a purpose in life. Or maybe just make it more dramatic than that. But that would have been great. That would have actually set up why he goes into the cave. Because he feels like he has a purpose in life. But nope, he just goes into the cave and we're like, I don't know why he did that. He's like 300 years too early. And by the way, the people in the cave are like cold. I'm pretty sure Christopher Waltz said the best, that they're probably going to kill each other before the event actually happens. And then after he gets out, and then when he's about to go in, he's like, I finally have a purpose in life. I'm like, not really. No, not really. That's not a purpose in life. That's just shutting yourself in a cave to die. And you're gonna die before the event that you're shutting yourself in the cave for is actually gonna happen. But hey, that's what I call screenwriting! I really like the Vietnamese woman because they actually developed her backstory very well. She is relatable in the sense that she has been through a lot, and she uses the experience that she had prior to the movie in order to further other people and not just themselves. And I'm like, that's great. That was a great thing that the writers did with her, and I think that was one of the bright spots in the movie, if not one of the only ones. The only problem I had with her is I didn't like that she spoke in broken English the entire time. It'd be great if they pulled like a Lee from East of Eden, and then she shows Matt Damon after she actually trusts him that she knows how to speak English. Like, if you want social commentary, that's a perfect thing to do, because then you can start talking about immigrants and how like Americans think of stereotypes more and that people should portray those stereotypes, but that's actually wrong and all that stuff. But no, she speaks in broken English the entire time. They use that for gags, and then I'm just sitting here like, that's not funny. The Vietnamese woman making jokes because she doesn't understand the English language isn't funny. It's just kind of disrespectful. I mean, in real life, I bet if the woman's like really okay with it and she does something funny, I guess that she says something that doesn't really mean anything in English, or not at least the thing that she's not trying to say, I guess you can say how that's funny. But someone wrote this. Someone wrote an Asian woman saying something bad in the English language that is supposed to be funny to the audience. And the entire time I'm like, Okay, and not only do they do that, they do that multiple times. And there's one sequence in the movie, which I don't even want to go into depth, where they repeat the joke twice. And like, just in case hey, audience, just in case you didn't get the joke the first time, I'm gonna repeat it, just so you can laugh the second time and I can get a second laugh. Like, that just, it really just brought the Vietnamese character down a few pegs. I'd say the only character that I actually really liked was Christopher Waltz, just because he was actually funny. Come on, it's Christopher Waltz, and he was just like, he did comedy the right way. Situational comedy, built up his character. They included multiple scenes with him saying what he wants to do, and then actually doing it, and then once he actually does something that's funny, we're like, that's totally what that character would do. That's funny. And then that's great. So they lead up to Christopher Waltz's character great. And so Christopher Waltz is a established character, and that's good for the movie. They weren't able to do that for other characters. I think the only other major characters in the movie, or at least the ones that were supposed to be major in the movie, was Jason Sudeikis. I don't know if I said that right, but he's the guy who played, like, the dumb guy in the Horrible Bosses franchise. He was only in the movie for, like, 3 scenes, and he only talked, like, a little bit, and so I was really disappointed that they used him more, and I can't even give my review on him because he was barely in the movie, and I guess the funny thing about him was that he's a sleazeball in disguise, but I was like, okay, he's cheating on he just hinted that he cheated on his wife, like, multiple times, but they just play that off for gags, like, hey. And then he's even making jokes like that when we're supposed to be establishing why Matt Damon's character is gonna shrink himself. He's one of the reasons that Matt Damon shrinks himself. And then he's casually throwing around like it's any other day. Oh, yeah, I cheated with my wife while I was in Vegas. I'm such a hotshot, and I'm like,
okay.
The last character would be Dr. Horhen, which we see in the beginning of the movie, discovers it, and then we don't really see him until the end of the movie, in which it turns out he runs a cult. It's not actually labeled as a cult, but it is a cult. In what was originally the first colony that they made when they downsized. And he was good. I mean, he was the leader of the cult, and he gave a good speech on why they're gonna go into the cave, on how they're gonna completely save human civilization. But then it all came crashing down when they said that they were going 300 years before the event actually happened. And I was like, okay, well, that just completely delegitimized the character, so good for you, movie. So that's it for characters. I'd say I give the characters solid 5 out of 10. Last but not least, the technical side of the movie, which usually this would be the action part of the movie, but there was none because it's not an action movie. Technically, the movie was nothing to write home about. It was just kind of mediocre. Like, the directing was not Christopher Nolan level hype, not even just like a David Fincher kind of like, oh, this is interesting. It was just regularly shot. I think the only thing that I noticed was probably the glaring problems when it came to physics and science, and also the fact some of the CGI was very noticeable, especially when they made them small. It could easily be solved by just putting the actors in front of a green screen and filming them close up, so it just looked like they were actually giving a regular speech, or from like a small perspective. But they're just sitting there like giving their speech, and they're like, yay high, and I'm like, I can barely even see what he's saying. I promised myself when I made this review that I wasn't going to go into a lot of detail on some of the huge logical mistakes that this movie made, but I think it kind of incorporates itself into what the problem with the movie is itself. The movie tries to make you think. It labels itself as a thinking movie because it is a social satire. You're supposed to look at the social satire, you're supposed to see what's happening, you're supposed to relate that to what's happening today. Like, that is a satire itself. It's making fun of events so that you can see what's happening in today. But the problem is that the more you think about it, the more just dumb it becomes, because there's so many glaring things that are wrong with it. For instance, we have one. In the end of the movie, it's raining, and the characters are just getting out of the car and the rain's hitting them. And then me, being the smart aleck I am, sitting in the theater, is just like,
wouldn't the rain be bigger if they were smaller?
I mean, the rain particles don't shrink too. Not all the rain particles in the cloud shrink. That's because you're small. Just because you're small doesn't mean other things are small. We have the Norway colony, in which they're by the water, and the only reason they don't get eaten by mosquitoes or the huge bugs is because they're in the water, they're next to the water, and I'm like, alright, but what's to stop like a turtle from coming over and terrorizing your village? Like, that'd be pretty funny, and in fact, that'd be a great way to introduce comedy in a really serious movie. And in fact, I'm not surprised that they actually didn't have a sequence like that. But no, that's also one of the other logical problems. Like, what was to stop like just an ant infestation, or just, you know, those like sand dune flies, the ones that come in like the masses and just terrorize you when you're trying to have a fun time at the beach. I was 8 years old when that happened. I still haven't gotten over it. Overall, just the lack of logic in this movie just made it completely like disinteresting and frankly boring. I'm gonna give it technically like a 5 out of 10. It would be a 7 if it didn't have a bunch of glaring logical problems, because like a 7 is just average. I mean, the person kind of looks small, but you can kind of notice the CGI. So overall, 5 out of 10. I think the combined lack of motivation for the characters, kind of ambiguity between the genre of the movie, clash together to just make such a boring and frankly weird movie. It completely disinterested the viewer. And honestly, I had a lot of high expectations for this movie, and they all disappeared. So, SebMovieTalk would give it a 4 out of 10, would not recommend. But hey, there are always better movies to watch out there. You guys have a great day. Or not. The choice is yours.